accepting the new 1,000 peso polymer bills in their daily transactions.
Kasi po nababalita po kasi na hindi tatanggapin yung pag may tupi or may lokot po. Mas okay po siguro kung sa dati kasi po yung ngayon, ingatan po talaga Kailangan yung wallet mo yung mahaba kasi pag natupi po baka mamaya hindi natanggapin ng iba.
They believe this is for security purposes and teaches Filipinos the proper way to handle money regardless of its material.
Pwedeng ganyan lang siya. Wag laman yung scramble. Pwedeng ganyan, pagka limawa. Di ba? Pwede naman pag namili ka kasi pag wala kang wallet. Hindi naman kasi maganda yung paggagawa May plastic siya.
Following claims made on social media, the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas or BSP clarifies and advises retailers and banks to accept folded bills. The BSP also reiterates its reminders on how to handle banknotes.
Huwag po natin masyadong i-crumple. Ganon din naman po dun sa paper banknote natin. Dinidiscourage namin ang publiko, huwag natin siya i-submerge sa chemicals o huwag po natin siyang planchahin. Bawal po siyang i-staple, bawal po siyang sulatan.
Senator Coco Pimentel believes the change in monetary design is impractical. He also wants to put a stop on the production and issuance of the new polymer notes.
Sa dami ng naririnig natin na don'ts, yung mga bawal gawin, mas nag-aalala ngayon ako, are we introducing really a more durable banknote or are we just giving unnecessary burden and obligations on our people? Siguro maghinay-hinay na muna ang BSP, kasama yan sa resolution ko, ilabas ang mga reklamo. Dapat umabot sa BSP.
The lawmaker also laments the impact of the shift to polymer to local abaca producers.
High-tech polymer pero plastic pala yan, plastic. Wala na pong made in the Philippines dyan na raw material.
Pimentel says his resolution may be tackled by the Senate Committee on Banks or Economic Affairs. Tristan Odalo, CNN Philippines.
A Filipino business tycoon receives the highest order of merit in France. San Miguel Corporation President and CEO Ramon Ang was awarded the Legion of Honor by the French government for his economic contributions to Manila-Paris relations. Ang thanked France for the distinction as he vowed to strengthen efforts to boost the economy. When we come back, the PBA will look into domestic abuse allegations against one of its players. We speak to sports lawyer Mickey Ingles live. And this Filipino-British nurse who made headlines amid the global pandemic receives the highest civilian award from Queen Elizabeth II. Stay tuned. Welcome back. A warning that violence will be mentioned in this report. PBA athlete Paul Desiderio was accused of physical and emotional abuse by former fiancée Agatha Uvero. Uvero posted that the Blackwater player strangled and threw her against the wall while she was 2 months pregnant with their child. Desiderio has not yet responded to our request for comment. The PBA in a statement says it will conduct its own inquiry into the matter. Blackwater Bossing vows to look into the situation and possibly state its position if the allegations are true and the player gives his consent. We now go above and beyond the headlines with sports lawyer Mickey Ingles. Attorney Mickey, hi, thank you so much for being with us tonight. Well, let's shine the light on this, shall we, Attorney Mickey? Can we go back first to the previous cases of several PBA players who faced similar allegations? I wanted to start with this because Siege Nantenko had tweeted and posted about this. No, parang let's do a little review. Can we do that, Attorney Mickey?
Okay. Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, well, can you recount those players and what the allegations were against them and what happened to those allegations and if there were any investigations?
Okay, so according to Siege's tweet, there has been like one Vowsy case per year since 2018 involving PBA players. I think the players were Mac Cardona, Halalon, Bo Belga, and now Paul Desiderio. Right? What happened to these cases, I don't know because we don't have any reports on what actually happened to these players. So I don't know what the PBA did with these players because some of them are still playing. So I'm not sure if that's because they found that after their investigation, nothing did happen or something was worked out, right? So I really can't answer what happened with these cases.
But,
so that's the long and short.
But would you know if there were cases filed against them or hindi na umabot sa ganoon?
I honestly don't think there were cases filed against them. At least from the news reports that I've been reading about the past cases involving PBA players.
Well, Agatha Uvero herself posted about it on social media earlier today, this morning. So it kind of took social media by storm, no? Ang daming reactions. What was interesting here was that she detailed all these allegations of emotional and physical abuse. And I wanted to ask you if everything that she said there, no, and there's a whole long list of them, it's a litany of supposed alleged violations. Are these violations of the Violence Against Women and Children Act or VAUSI? They are, right?
Yes, they are. Because if everyone remembers, violence against women and children, they cover any acts by an intimate person against a woman who was either his wife or former wife or with a person whom he has sexual relations or in a dating relationship with. So that covers the dating relationship between Agatha and Mr. Desiderio, right? And the acts covered by VAUSI include physical violence, sexual violence, psychological violence, and economic abuse. So the litany of alleged acts stated by Agatha in her tweet fall within physical violence and psychological abuse. So if these allegations are true, then they are clear violations of VAUSI.
They may be allegations of violations of the VAUSI. However, these are social media posts. We've been told, and we're not quite sure, no, that she had this blottered already. However, hindi pa po ito, Attorney Mickey, ang kaso, right? If she wants to take this any further, she needs to file a case, correct?
Yeah, definitely. So under VAUSI, you have actually two options whenever you are faced with abuse by your intimate partner and you're a woman. Number one, you can file for a protection order with the barangay. And alternatively, or maybe even as an addition to it, you can file a criminal case. So VAUSI is a criminal law. If Mr. Desiderio is found guilty of these acts, he will be facing jail time. But of course, that depends on Agatha if she wants to push through with filing a case in court.
You know, people would say kasi, some people would venture to guess na pwede bang hindi na lang mag-file ng kaso, hindi ba pwedeng gobyerno na lang sampa ng kaso. Pero ang kaso, yung People of the Philippines versus so-and-so, that can only happen kung may complainant. Meaning, in this case, the woman here, Agatha, in this case, right? Kailangan siya mag-file ng kaso para maging People of the Philippines versus Paul Desiderio. Is that correct?
Well, VAUSI is a public crime, so technically anyone can file for Miss Agatha. But the question is, how will the prosecution proceed if Miss Agatha doesn't want to at least participate in giving her affidavit or giving her side? So that's the rub there, right? I mean, if she wants to participate, then she can file it on her own. If she doesn't want to participate, someone else can file it for her under VAUSI. But how will we get her side during trial and during
And
the
what is the
testimonies,
reason
right? So
why?
that's the
What is the
problem.
reason, Attorney Mickey, why women don't usually want to file a case? They will talk about
Sorry?
it, magpo-post sa social media, and this has happened in the past. We've seen that happen. And then hindi magsasampa ng kaso.
Yeah, well, we've seen a lot of that, and it's for a number of reasons. Number one is the stigma that they might face, right? So Agatha posted about it, and immediately she got people telling her that it's not true, or people telling her that it's her fault, right? And we've seen that in a number of cases whenever a woman comes up to speak. Another reason why a woman might not want to file a case of VAUSI is because of the costs. And another reason might be based on emotion, because if you file a case of VAUSI, you will have to see your abuser in court, right? You will have to face him, you will have to give testimonies against him. And some women might not want to do it and just go on their own way.
Yung binanggit mo kanina lang, Attorney Mickey, ito yung sinasabing victim shaming, right? Palaging may dahilan, kasi ikaw, kasi ganito ganyan, etc. Right?
Yes, victim shaming. Yeah.
And we should shine a light on this because like we've already pointed that, like what has already been pointed out, ang dami nang lumalabas, lumilitaw na ganito, specifically sa PBA, pero wala naman talaga nangyayari.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if what we've seen so far since 2018 is real, then the PBA should really step in to address the situation. I mean, the PBA has released a statement that they're going to investigate, but hopefully the investigation here really pushes through and something can be seen based on the investigation. Yeah, the PBA has the grounds under its constitution and bylaws to look into misconduct by its players, right? There's a morality clause there that mandates the players to have good moral character, to not do anything that might destroy the reputation of the game or the sport, and domestic violence does the thing.
At kailangan matuloy pa rin ang investigasyon kahit walang kaso. I mean, you know, for some reason, biglang magsabi si Agatha Uvero na hindi na ako magsasampa ng kaso, just in case. Kailangan tuloy pa rin yung investigasyon.
Yeah, definitely. So the investigation of the PBA and the filing of a criminal case by Agatha are totally independent. The filing of Agatha is a criminal case which involves our local courts. The investigation by the PBA will be an administrative matter handled by the rules and regulations of the PBA, so they can go separately and independently.
Thank you so much for your insights, Attorney Mickey Ingles, sports lawyer. Salamat, Mickey. In other news, a Filipino-British nurse who administered the first COVID vaccine in the world was honored by the UK's Queen Elizabeth II with the highest civilian award for gallantry. May Parsons received the George Cross Award, representing the medical staff of the country's National Health Service. The honor recognizes, quote, acts of the greatest heroism. And that is it for now. Join me again on News.ph at 7 p.m. and on Politics as usual at 8. I'm Pio Ontiveros for Newsnight, where we go above and beyond the headlines.
RPN, Radio Philippines Network Incorporated, DXKO. 13.68 sa dial sa inyong radyo. RPN DXKO, ang Radyo Ronda dili sa Dakbayan sa Cagayan de Oro. Sibiyahan na may galaon sa katawhan, andam na serbisyo sa tanan. Ang RPN DXKO Radyo Ronda sakop sa KBP, kapisanan ng mga broadcaster ng Pilipinas.
Pasalamati ang Ginoo kay maayo siya, ug walay paglubad ang
Good hygiene is the most effective way to combat infectious diseases such as COVID-19, as well as the flu. It mirrors the old adage that prevention is better than cure. Today, we'll learn more benefits of practicing good hygiene and its overall effects on our mental health. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and welcome to MedTalk Health Talk on CNN Philippines. Our guests are here today to discuss the importance of hygiene. With us is Dr. Aika Buenavista. She's a lifestyle medicine specialist from Signature Medical Concierge. Also joining us is AJ Sung Lao. He's a psychologist from MindPlus by Life Science. Good hygiene involves a lot of self-discipline. If there's one silver lining that this past pandemic has brought about, was that increased consciousness on good hygiene. I'll start the discussion with Dr. Aika. Please explain to our audience, what exactly are we trying to achieve here by having the habit of good hygiene?
First of all, it's really important that we do practice good hygiene in order to help us keep our bodies healthy and clean. It's not only good for our physical health, but also our mental well-being, right? Mm-hmm. And we're not only helping ourselves, but also the people around us because we prevent illnesses in the first place. Aesthetically wise, we feel good about ourselves, about our appearance. And in a social level, usually we would avoid people with poor personal hygiene because of body odor. And thus this can result to isolation and loneliness. So as you can see, our hygiene impacts our overall well-being.
AJ, is having good or bad hygiene a sign that there is probably some behavioral problem involved here? Because we have to also understand that hygiene is somewhat culturally related. The hygiene that we're used to here in the Philippines may be different in other parts of the world. What can you say about that?
It's really cultured. How far are we acting relative to what we're used to in our culture? And malaking bagay nga sa Pilipinas, lalo nga na ang, let's say, pagligo araw-araw, brushing your teeth every day. So these basic things. And if we're having poor hygiene, we're really going away from that norm, which could be a sign of many things. Again, in the pandemic, the extreme has really been doing it too much. While, very common din for people struggling with their mental health na not let go nila to.
When it comes to mental health, AJ, what are some of the red flags? Kumbaga, ano yung cut-off ng level of hygiene ng isang tao dito sa Philippines to be considered, kumbaga, mentally healthy?
Yung pinakamadaling may sinanto is how much is it disrupting our day-to-day lives? Na-mention nga kanina na, for example, nahiya tayo lumabas ng bahay dahil nga we're not being hygienic, or we're not feeling clean, or we're getting sick, we're getting very common issues na could be solved by good hygiene. Let's say, gum problems or nag-break out skin natin dahil nga di tayo naliligo. So these are things that could already be signs that we might be dealing with something, a mental illness now or severe symptoms of one.
Now, I'll go back to Dr. Aika. When it comes to basic hygiene, what is considered basic?
Okay, actually, we do have different types of hygiene. So first, for example, your dental hygiene. Another type of hygiene is your hand hygiene. And another type of hygiene is, of course, our nails. And of course, we have toilet hygiene, properly disposing tissues that we use, especially if you have an infection. You don't want to spread it within the home. Okay, so we have to practice that proper etiquette inside the toilet.
Pandemic-induced anxiety is a real thing and may have also made some people who have been working at home more anxious and have these certain feelings, especially when it comes to contacting diseases, maybe germs. Now, AJ, let's talk about that for a minute. Is it normal to still be anxious nowadays na ma-infect or makapitan ng germs or kumbaga takot lumabas because baka mahawa ako ng COVID?
Now we've seen it nga over how the pandemic goes. I think that shows really it's okay to be anxious about COVID. I think that's a normal state talaga because it's an illness. Even if you're vaccinated, we still don't want to get sick. But really what we're seeing over the growing COVID anxiety and growing health anxiety is really habits and mga behaviors na lagpas na talaga doon we're in. We've had people not go out at all for years. And as the economy is opening up, more and more people are trying to meet face-to-face. Sometimes it could also limit the kind of opportunities that we get. We're also seeing people that, as you mentioned, like, are still hoarding, let's say, cleaning supplies. They're still hoarding alcohol. And it's really become to the point it's debilitating na.
That's correct. But the question now is, how does that affect your overall mental health? Because this pandemic has made it uneasy for those who struggle with a condition called germophobia. Now, germophobia is the fear of germs. And in this case, germs refer broadly to any microorganism that causes disease. For instance, bacteria, viruses, or even parasites. Now, AJ, can you please tell us more about this fear of microbes in general? What causes a person to be considered a germaphobe?
COVID is a powerful example because the entire environment became hostile to you. And we know it's a virus, we know you can get it. Early in the pandemic, the belief was you can get it from surfaces. That's why we were cleaning everything or having UV everything. The thresholds here is, as I mentioned kanina with bad hygiene, na how much of it is disrupting your day-to-day life na? Is it really affecting you in a way that makes relationships harder, that gives you, going outside, you're already feeling anxious, that just thinking about it makes it scary for you? These symptoms that onting isip mo palang may anxiety na, and this could be triggered by things, again, over the pandemic, say trauma, nagkasakit kayo or someone in the family, just the overall overwhelmingness of the news in the surges of the pandemic could also trigger this.
Now, Dr. Aika, it's a good thing that a lot of people are more hygienic conscious nowadays, but is there a right or wrong way to actually be hygienic?
The thing about that, it can lead to health risks. Okay? So this can be so persistent that it would affect our day-to-day life to the point that they would fear going out, just eating in a restaurant, or even doing sexual relationships with their partners. They fear going out to places that have a lot of germs, like public bathrooms, public transportation. They don't even go to school, to work. They are scared of touching doorknobs or shaking hands with somebody they just met. And it can also lead to a disorder called OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, where we see patients would have to wash their hands 10 times after they eat, or they would have to shower 10 times in a day, or clean a surface 20 times. So as you can see, it's a dramatic response that is not necessary. Plus, it is time consuming. So the whole day, they're just cleaning and they don't do anything else but just clean. They cannot work. They cannot do their school task as well. They can even take care of themselves or even their children if they're parents. And so as you can see, it's affecting the overall well-being of a person.
When we come back, we'll discuss what happens when you practice good hygiene but still experience body odor. We'll be right back here on MedTalk Health Talk. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez and welcome back to MedTalk Health Talk. We've been discussing proper hygiene and some of the effects, but what happens if even though you practice good hygiene, you still notice a sense of body odor lingering on yourself? Now, Dr. Aika, when it comes to body odor, how is this produced? A lot of people will note, obviously, body odor by this aroma in themselves. What causes this? Let's dive deep into the cause of this.
Yes, so for body odor, it's not just about the hygienic practices of a person, but it's a mix also of our sweat glands, how it activates in our body, as well as bacteria. So it can also change because of our hormones, especially if there's hormonal imbalance, even the food that we eat, okay, certain infections that we might have already, medications that we are drinking, and other underlying conditions like diabetes. So they can also have body odor as a complications.
Dr. Aika, you bring up some very good points there. Now, let's tackle them a little bit more specifically here. When it comes to, you mentioned glandular problems, maybe the sweat glands. What is happening here? Anong nangyayari? Bakit nagkakaroon ng body odor?
So the first thing, of course, when especially it's a bit smelly, doctors would have to investigate further, especially trying to check if a patient has diabetes, gout, menopause, or undergoing menopause, if they have a very hyperactive thyroid, or they have a liver problem as well as a kidney problem, and even other infectious disease. It can, of course, be due to hormonal changes. So, for example, for those who are undergoing menopause, they have hot flushes. For women, okay, it is expected that during ovulation in their menstrual cycle, the body's odor also changes. So that's a normal occurrence in females.
Now, Dr. Aika, how about when it comes to certain foods? What component in that food creates a reaction in the body that may promote hypersecretion of the glands and then thus cause some body odor?
Yeah, so some foods actually have a high amount of sulfur, and sulfur is the one that causes that a bit of rotten smell, and they can be obtained from onions, garlic, cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, and red meat. We also sometimes use spices, right, to give taste to the food, like for example MSG. Even spices like curry can give that certain odor, and hot sauces as well.
Now, AJ, as discussed by Dr. Aika, there are several things that may cause body odor that are beyond the control of the individual. Now, let's discuss that. How does this affect? Because kahit na they're practicing good hygiene, they have good hygiene habits, meron pa rin talagang smell. And it can affect them in both their relationships. As we mentioned earlier, it may be culturally unacceptable in certain areas. What effect can this happen to the individual?
The first year is really frustration. Na imagine I'm doing everything I need to, I'm doing it well, but it's still happening, still being, I still notice a body odor from me, so that can cause frustration. On a more social level though, yun nga, there could be baka ma-ostracize ka or mabully ka. Children are susceptible to this, especially some kids don't really know how these things happen, especially again in puberty where these kinds of perceptions are matter. Na, oh, pagka may BO ka, as what people call it, it could lead to people to bully you, to make fun of you. As an adult, there's a lot of shame. Now, might want you to recess a bit, might want you to, ay, kasi lumabas ako because I'm ashamed of my body odor.
How should parents approach this then? Should they reinforce the security of the child, or should the parents try really and find ways on how to manage that odor to fit in the society that they're in?
I think, of course, the number one thing your parents should really do is, of course, make sure they know the cause. Now, as Dr. Aika mentioned earlier, body odor, especially with good hygiene, might be caused from an infection or certain diseases. So, number one, let's make sure that's not it. But on specifically just the child, of course, one thing is really to communicate to the child that often it's not them, right? Children can be mean, certain individuals can be cruel, and that's something that's outside of our control. Like we can't really control how they react, but then we can prepare the child to be able to manage certain, how they respond to that, to those kinds of, let's say, bullying, those kinds of actions. At the same time, hopefully, so in a school, we also talk to the teachers or talk to the administrator to make sure that at least we prevent them.
AJ mentioned how important it is to find the reason for that body odor and to address that. Let's talk about addressing that. If someone has BO because of hyperactive sweat gland, what type of treatments are usually used to manage this?
So first of all, if you do have body odor, it's best to consult your doctor first. I know there are a lot of information online that would be sold as home remedies. But of course, remember that this also is treated by medications and procedures. Like for example, we do small injections of Botox in the armpit. There are also some prescription medications that we give to patients, even antibiotics, especially if it is bacterial in nature. Some even would have very severe conditions that would need surgery. So we also have to dive into the personal hygiene of the patient, which we do as lifestyle medicine physicians, even focusing on the stress level of a person, because remember, as I mentioned a while ago, that odors can also stem from the stress level of a patient.
Now, coming up, we'll give you tips on how to practice better hygiene, only here on MedTalk Health Talk. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and this is MedTalk Health Talk, where your care always comes first. Now, we've been talking about good hygiene and habits to establish in order to continue to practice good hygiene. With that in mind, Dr. Aika, what are some tips that you could share with our viewers in trying to practice good hygiene? In essential good hygiene tips, let's start with taking a bath. Is the type of soap important pag naliligo ang isang tao? And is there a certain time limit na dapat? Because we all know when it comes to brushing our teeth or washing our hands, there has to be some level naman of time for you to have those effects of good hygiene. When it comes to bathing, what are some tips that you could share with the viewers?
It would depend on the skin concern of course, of the patient. So for example, if they do have a fungal infection, we would prescribe fungal soaps. If the patient has sensitive skin, of course, we would prescribe very hypoallergenic skin soaps in the first for the body. And with regards to the timing, of course, for example, for brushing your teeth, at least 2 minutes is already enough, as long as it is done properly in a circular manner. And of course, they do have to floss, okay, every day, at least before going to sleep. With regards to hand washing, you would also want to use any soap is fine as long as it's mild soap within the 5-step recommendation of course, WHO. Again, washing your hands under running water and then making sure that the soap would bubble or lather, rubbing them, okay, on the back of your hands, between your fingers and underneath your nails.
Now, AJ, with all of this, all the tips in mind, what can you advise our viewers who are still anxious to go out, who are still anxious because the pandemic is still with us? That is still a reality, and it causes that level of anxiety. It affects their work, it affects their performance. What advice can you give them?
I think the number one advice really is, of course, let's check our habits again. Dahil because of how long the pandemic has been, we've really kind of normalized our habits in the pandemic mindset. But as we now go outside of this, as again, the economy opens up, we're able to go out, we can start recreating habits again that kind of normalizes our lives in this space na. So it could be something like going out with friends. We could schedule that from dati online meetups. Now we can do it face-to-face. These are things that we don't have to do alone. I think that's also an important reminder. We could have family members, like, they go out to an open park where we feel it's safer, or go out in places with good health protocols in place. So we don't have to like suddenly go out and all in tayo agad. We can do it step by step as we try to, again, kind of reacclimate ourselves to the world.
For those who are still unsure about their current mental health, especially now that the pandemic is hopefully on the tail end, is this something that they should try and internalize? Is it okay for them to talk to mental health specialists such as psychologists or even psychiatrists, even counselors? Where can they go?
Number one, I think what we always tell people is there's no wrong time to seek professional help. Like, you don't have to be at the brink, you don't have to be at the end of your wit to ask for support. So anytime is okay, even if you're feeling okay. Where can people go? So there's a lot of clinics. I myself is in Mind Plus by Life Science. That's based in BGC. Of course, there are other clinics. You can find them in resources. DOH has a list of all accredited mental clinics. There's also referral systems like silakbo.ph/help that you can go to check which clinics might be near you. So one benefit of the pandemic is a lot of therapists have went online. So if you're feeling like, oh, I don't want to meet anyone face-to-face yet, that's also an option. But as we move this pandemic along, we do expect that most therapists, most counselors, even psychiatrists, will return to a more hybrid setup where they'll have a face-to-face clinic for those that really need it.
Thank you very much, Dr. Aika Buenavista and AJ Sunglao, for being with us today and sharing your tips as well as your expertise about personal hygiene. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and thank you for watching MedTalk Health Talk. We'll see you again next time.